It is time for Spirit Daily. Go to spiritdaily.com to find all the latest news in regards to your spirituality, and then some. We have the books from Michael H. Brown. I believe you have some videos as well. I just can't remember. But one of my favorite websites, spiritdaily.com. Thank you very much for listening and tuning in on a regular basis. It's one of the most popular shows that I do, and we really enjoy this kind of stuff. A lot going on in the world around us. Michael H. Brown. Before we get to some of the stories that we're going to cover, it's pretty interesting to watch. Well, I'm not going to say it's interesting to watch because I haven't been watching, but it's interesting to watch people that are watching all of this stuff about the impeachment and some of the conversations I overhear in the office place. I'm here in New York City, so everybody, for the most part, is anti-Trump. You would think that it would be a majority in this office, but the people that don't say anything, and there's more people that don't say anything, it turns out that they are more on the side of the president and really would wish this stuff would already stop because it doesn't seem like anything is working in Washington. Nothing is getting done. And I can't remember ever hearing a person who goes to law school or who went to law school ever say that hearsay is as good as direct evidence. I don't know where this person graduated in his law class, but definitely not the guy that I want representing me in court. So what's your take on what's going on right now?
Well, I take a spiritual perspective on, trying to take a spiritual perspective on everything, and I certainly see a country that in my lifetime has never been remotely as divided, and I don't think has been as divided as it is since the Civil War. It's just absolutely astonishing. There's two different realities out there. There's the realities that the conservatives look at, and we've always been in the realm of conservatives, and then there's the liberal take, and they're watching different shows and seeing totally different spins. I frankly don't trust any of the news outlets anymore, liberal or conservative.
No, I don't trust them either.
Because they're not presenting pictures. If I see things directly, I have been watching some of the impeachment because I want to see for myself before it's spun. But the bottom line, without getting into politics, which is so vitriolic right now and so raucous and so divisive, it's just incredible what's going on in this country. You know, Zach, Abraham Lincoln once amazingly issued a proclamation. It was actually back in 1863 on March 30th. And in that proclamation, he called for a national day of, get this, prayer and fasting because of the Civil War. And not only that, Zach, but he said right there, I'll quote it directly, he said, insomuch as we know that by his divine law, talking about God, nations like individuals are subjected to punishments and chastisements in this world, may we not justly fear that the awful calamity of civil war which now desolates the land may be but a punishment inflicted on us. And he thought, he goes on to say, it was a chastisement, a divine chastisement for slavery. And we look now at the divisiveness, and I got to ask, is this divisiveness we have, and I think is going to intensify because of the sin of something like abortion?
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, I would agree with that. When you were talking about Abraham Lincoln and his assessment, I immediately thought about abortion. Now, even the church fathers, on occasion, wrote about this, and murder of the infant is immoral. It's wrong. John Chrysostom writes a piece on it. I'll have to fetch it one of these days, and we could talk about that. Because a lot of people think that this is something new to our society that never happened before in the past. But things do have a tendency of repeating themselves. One of the things that's been sort of confusing me is what I'm hearing on the radio. Never mind the fake news. These people who claim that they have a prophetic message or they can decode the Bible better than anybody else, get on coast to coast, and they literally scare the living daylights out of me. Now, if they scare the living daylights out of somebody listening to the point where they repent for the kingdom of God is at hand and they redirect their spiritual life and turn it around, that's a good thing. But by and large, I think that I've got a good handle on that, and it just disturbs me. And then I think of what Christ warns us about, where many will come in my name, prophesizing, And I think that this is what I'm hearing. Now, they blame it on the Russians, and the Russians have these advanced nuclear weapons and an ABM shield, and we'll be decimated. We'll only have 30 million people left after they get done with us. They'll strike first. Then if it's not Russia, it's China. Now, I do know China's a problem. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. We've had this trade imbalance. They manipulate currency. All of these things that Donald Trump has accused the Chinese of doing, they do. And when he takes action to try to take corrective measures to secure our economy so it's as strong as in a strong position as possible, he gets nothing but grief from, I guess, the left and liberal side. I just don't understand it. It makes me wonder who they're in cahoots with. And then you look at the progressive Chinese technology over the years. Most of it is stolen, and now they're using it against us. So there's a lot going on in this world of ours. I listen to these guys that scare us when it comes to prophecy. That's why we have spiritdaily.com. I love this podcast. I like talking about these things with Michael H. Brown. Michael, why don't you just give us a little bit of a common sense approach on how we should face these kind of issues and situations? And then maybe as you talk about that, one of the things that one of these guests spoke about is the second secret of Fatima being even more important than the third or the first.
Well, first of all, on alleged prophets, I discount, to be frank about it, the majority of them. Now, I accept, that doesn't mean I don't accept many of them, because Zach, through the last 30 years, in speaking in hundreds of churches in hundreds of cities, have come across dozens and dozens and dozens of locutionists and seers and so forth, and I still get messages and all that. And I accept some of them, or at least for discernment. Other ones, not so much. We have to be very careful, and you have to be careful about ones that are too specific with what's going to happen, that are too long and rambling, that specify dates. I think these are all problems. John of the Cross, a famous saint who wrote a lot about mystical theology, he said, quote, "It is here that the devil customarily fills them with presumption and pride. Drowned by vanity and arrogance, they allow themselves to be seen in exterior acts of apparent holiness, such as raptures and other exhibitions. And, of course, they issue, in some cases, predictions. However, there are legitimate prophets. There are legitimate predictions, I believe. And we've seen some come true from various seers around the world, as well as famous situations like Fatima. So I certainly don't discount them, but I just urge cautious discernment.
Yeah, I would say that that's smart. Now let's go over to the second secret of Fatima. We kind of understand what the third might be. It's not a very good prediction or a prophecy. But what does the second secret of Fatima fit in all of this?
Well, second secret had a couple of things in it. It had a vision of hell and so forth. I think you're referring to where it refers to. It also asked for communion of reparation on the first Saturdays of the month, which really hasn't been done largely by the church. It also asked for the consecration of Russia. And Our Lady at Fatima had said if her request were heeded, Russia would be converted. There'd be peace. If not, she'd spread her errors throughout the world, causing various conflicts and wars and persecutions of the church. And the good would be martyred, so forth, and so on. She said in the end, the Pope would consecrate Russia to her, and the country would be converted, and there'd be a period of peace. Some people think that it occurred, that John Paul II in the early 1980s, I believe 81, carried out a consecration of the world that implicitly included Russia. And we look at that afterwards, Zach, it's phenomenal what happened after that. I mean, you had the fall of the Iron Curtain. No one back in the 80s expected that to ever happen in our lifetimes. No diplomat, no embassy, no State Department ever expected that, or military intelligence officer. I mean, it seemed rock solid. The USSR was going to remain an implacable enemy and a superpower and an enemy of the United States. But there it went, starting with Poland, which worked, of course, hand in hand, Lech Walesa, with Pope John Paul II in effecting change there, and then it spread like a virus throughout Eastern Europe, and eventually even in the Soviet Union. So we hear a lot of talk about Ukraine now. It's split off from the Soviet Union, as did other republics. So you could say that there was a consecration, and that the results were seen in what happened in the end of the evil empire, if you will. Other people say, hey, not so fast. Russia's not fully converted right now. And look at all of the assassinations that take place, the aggression, the subversions of other nations, and so forth. And so it's
You mean like the stuff that we do here?
we have. Well, I hope we don't assassinate quite like the KGB, but I'm not privy to a lot of information. So I don't know if Russia has turned a corner or not. I would hope it has, but you're kind of referring to other prophecies that raise fears about Russia invading the U.S. as well as China. And I hear a lot of those, and have heard a lot of those through the years too. Some of which seem credible to me. That both of those nations would one day be a real issue to the United States after the United States is kind of dismantled.
Well, I think if we get dismantled, we have it coming to us because we've fallen away. It reminds me of the story of Israel and how they would bring in strange gods, and the next thing you know, and to really make it a synopsis, first the northern kingdom falls, and then you have the land of Judah, and around AD 70, it pretty much goes out of existence with the temple system when there's a rebellion, and Rome squashes the rebellion, and we move on in history. Now, with that in mind, and you talk about the consecration in Russia and the fall of the SSR, the USSR, I would say, based on my location and my lens and what I see, I'm astonished of the reemergence of orthodoxy within Russia and without Russia.
Yes.
And the Ukraine. There's some problems that are happening right now that people aren't paying attention to that could be problematic on a world stage. For instance, Istanbul, Bartholomew is recognizing what was considered a schismatic Orthodox church, not in communion with Moscow Patriarchy, and it's caused a lot of ripples and a lot of problems and some violent acts happening in the Ukraine as we speak. And I think that that'll get fleshed out. But by and large, I don't think anybody that would study Russian studies in the early 80s like I did and was part of the United States Army and thinking about how we would take on Russia in a war, I never thought in a million years that I would see the president of Russia visiting the Patriarch of Moscow and attending divine liturgy on a regular basis. Now, I can't say what the state of his soul is. I can't judge that. None of us can, but it is really, truly remarkable when you think about that. Other things about Russia, they don't have this free-flowing, do what you want to do abortion policy in Russia. So they kind of have a little bit more, I think, respect for life in that regard, which we don't have any apparently in this country. When you see politicians clapping like Cuomo did when he signed that law and everybody jumping up and down, if I was forced to sign such a thing as a governor, I would be under duress. I think that I would be, you could tell that I'd be pale. I wouldn't be able to do it, I don't think.
I hope not.
I guess, I couldn't, right? So I would veto it.
But
no,
absolutely.
Yeah, I would hate to have to be put in that position to begin with. Now, when you think about these guys and how this priest in South Carolina denied Joe Biden communion, saying that, you really excommunicated yourself from the church with your position on abortion, and then Cardinal Dolan saying he wouldn't have done that, I think we have a major problem in the leadership of the Roman Catholic Church. There should be no question what the result would be. If I was the Cardinal of New York and Cuomo signed that bill and he calls himself a Roman Catholic, as soon as he got done with his last name, the excommunication bull would be going out. I would not accept that in any way, shape, or form. Don't call yourself Roman Catholic if you believe in that. And I also say this, if you call yourself a Christian and you support candidates who are pro-abortion, pro-murder of infants, infanticide, you excommunicated yourself. You cannot vote for people like that.
Well, I mean, you're not going to get an argument from me. I certainly agree with that. I think that there should be a standard by which no Catholic politician receives communion. Right now, it's kind of hit or miss, depending on what diocese it is and what politician. But, yeah, I mean, we had the same discussion when Teddy Kennedy was there. But, you know, there's quite a bit of disorganization and disarray. It has been for a couple decades in the Catholic Church, especially with the abuse. We all know that well. But, you know, I agree. And this is a huge thing. It's not the only thing.
There's a lot of problems going on, yeah.
A lot of people die, a lot of young people, including unborn, because of pollution. And yet we don't hear hardly anything about that. That's a huge pro-life issue. Matter of fact, I've seen statistics whereby tallying the deaths from various forms of pollution, whether it's toxic or air pollution in India, China, and so forth. More people die worldwide of pollution than from abortion. So I think that we have to walk and chew gum at the same time with issues like this. There's a lot that's not right now, but a lot of it goes under the radar.
Well, I would say in regard to the environment, no matter who you are, but let's just talk to Christians right now, I can't tell you what the solution is to what they consider now remember, it was originally global warming, but when I was a kid, they were talking about global cooling and the coming ice age. I remember that in the 70s, that was a possibility, but we go from global warming, and when that doesn't seem to catch on, it goes to climate change. And in my whole criticism of global warming and climate change is that we all know, and with good reason, that the data has been corrupted. So if the data is corrupted, I can't go by that science. I will use the same argument that they will use against anti-vaxxers. You're anti-science if you're not using the correct data. You're also anti-science if you don't use what's called the scientific method. I mean, it's basic science, basic 101. So regardless of whether you want to call it global climate change or global warming, what we should be doing is making sure that we do things like we don't litter, we take care of our environment. When you get ready to take a shower, think about the people that don't have water in other parts of the world and don't waste water.
And also think about the chemicals entering your skin. Look, there's a climate swerve. It's just like the Middle Ages. And there was a chastisement, a divine chastisement in the Middle Ages. That was followed. That occurred between the year 1000 and around the midpoint of the 1300s, the High Middle Ages. I've studied that in depth. I interviewed many dozens of climatologists back in the late 1990s around the world. Before it was a political football. There has been a swerve in climate, and it mirrors the climate that was around the High Middle Ages, just before bubonic plague. But it wasn't caused by this, that, or the other thing. That's the real dispute. Is it caused by the oil industry or what we're doing and so forth? Back then it was caused by what was going on in the sun. And it was followed, I think it was a divine chastisement, and it was followed by global cooling, as you indicate, something called the Maunder minimum, in which the sunspots disappeared. And that radical change in climate from global warming to global cooling weakened the populace. It killed a lot of crops, created famine, epidemics, and led the way to the Black Death that started in earnest in the mid-1300s, so the mid-14th century, and killed one quarter to one-third of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East.
And, I saw in one of the news stories that came across the wire today that there is a couple of cases of bubonic plague in China right now.
Sure, it could erupt again or something else. I mean, you talk about China. I don't know what it is, Zach. I nearly hate to say this because it sounds biased, but it just seems like so many bad things come from China.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, whether it's a bug that killed my huge pineapple palm tree out
invasive species with big teeth,
or chicken flu, or whatever it is. Bubonic plague came from that area. It just seems like the land of the Red Dragon is not such great luck.
I think we need to consecrate China. That's what we need to do. They're a bigger
agree.
problem.
I
Now,
agree
we've discussed. We got right from the beginning. We discussed the Trump situation. We discussed some of the goings on in the world, prophecy, and all of those things. Let's go to spiritdaily.com right now. And one of the lead stories that you have going on is exorcists take radically different views of church crisis. Would you explain what that is all about?
Well, it's amazing. As most of our viewership is aware, virtually all of them, we've had, these are raucous times in the church. There have been a lot of controversies with various statements from the Pope and so forth. We respect the Pope. We are obedient to the Pope at the same time that we report what goes on. And there was tremendous controversy during what they call the Amazonian Synod, that some of the indigenous people, the natives of Amazon regions, brought to Rome, in effect was a pagan idol. Pachamama, I don't know how to pronounce it, but at any rate, this was allowed into the goings-on at the Vatican and created a huge stir, just like St. John Paul II created a big stir by allowing all the different religions, including the Buddhists with their statues at Assisi in Italy for a ecumenical service. But at any rate, yeah, it has caused the same type of division, toxic division in the church that we're seeing in politics in the United States. We even have our headline stories on how these various exorcists, even from the same country of Ireland, differ as to what's going on, as some people say we're in danger of a schism. One exorcist criticizes and says that opposition to the Pope is coming from the dark side. This is a Father Pat Collins of Ascension in Ireland. He said this at a major charismatic conference. And then on the other hand, you have 4 exorcists from Ireland who recently, in November, about a week ago, issued a statement asking for worldwide prayer on December 6th, as well as fasting, for the purpose of driving out, quote, any diabolic influence within a church that has gained as a result of recent events, unquote, referring to that ritual at the Vatican with these natives from Amazonian regions. So they're saying that the darkness is coming from within the Vatican. Well, so, wow. You have tremendous divergence of opinion, to say the least.
Well, this has been going on for quite some time. I remember listening to Father Malachi Martin about Vatican II and the politics that were at play and the liberal theologians and their thoughts. And then you have St. Paul VI, St. Pope Paul VI, who allegedly said the smoke of Satan is in the Vatican. I don't know the exact word, so I'll put, quote-unquote, sick next to that. Then you have this issue when Pope Benedict XVI stepped down, when he said he was going to resign. Lightning hit the Vatican twice. I wonder, who is the real Pope? We have a very interesting situation going on, because I don't believe that, and I'm not an expert on canon law, but it just doesn't smell right that you have a Pope Emeritus and then you have this current Pope, and God knows what was going on in the background that caused this in the first place. We all have our suspicions, and we all hear the stories. But what do you think about Pope Benedict XVI and Pope Francis?
Well, I mean, I got to believe Pope Benedict when he says just recently that, he was not forced out, and in any way, and that that there is only one Pope, and it is Francis. And this, I'm just quoting Benedict XVI. I'm not taking a stand either way.
That's fine.
But that's what he says. And whatever, Zach, it comes down to, it certainly, to be honest with you, I wish he'd never resigned. I think that it's a bad precedent. I don't think a pope should resign. I think he should serve until he dies. But that's what happened. And Benedict chose to do it. There is no indication whatsoever that he's under duress. But at any rate, the big problem is, and this is pointed out by an Orthodox authority, a Coptic Orthodox Pope, who once said that a church that does not fast is not an apostolic church. And we don't fast. We are not fasting in this church. We're not praying enough. We're getting too political. And if we would only go back to prayer and fasting, we would be able to discern better in all of this chaos that surrounds us.
I would agree with that. Now, let me just remind people, back in the old days, before Vatican II, most Catholics abstain from meat on Wednesdays and Fridays. This is a practice that continues in the Orthodox Church. There's always exceptions to the rule, but you're right. Fasting and prayer is all part of our walk with the Lord, and we really have to do a better job at that. I think it gets watered down because of the message that you hear from the evangelical side that's all over the radio and on television. They will almost give you the idea that there's nothing you can do. It's, you're saved by grace and it works. I mean, faith without works is dead. I mean, we keep forgetting about that one. So
that's amazing. And this whole prosperity
that's
thing
awful.
that's going on is just astonishing to me. Absolutely amazing to me. But like I said, people like John Paul II, Pope Benedict, and so forth. You have to listen carefully to their words.
Yeah, I'm just I just find it interesting, and I hear what the rumors are. I mean, it's intriguing to me. Now, one of the things that you have at spiritdaily.com is avoiding rash judgment. I think that this is a good topic to end our show for today. Turn your attention upon yourself and beware of judging the deeds of other men. For in judging others, a man labors vainly, often makes mistakes, and easily sins. Whereas in judging and taking stock of himself, he does something that is always profitable. Where did you find this? This is really, from the Imitations of Christ. Thomas Kempis, there you go. Saw that.
That's right. And we do so much judging, we do so much besmirching. All you need to go viral is to be an attack dog in our current society. Just go after other people, say whatever you want about them, get all anger roiled up, and your clickbait. Your clickbait is going to work, and so forth. I refuse to be drawn into that.
Well, how many times growing up have you had that conversation to yourself? Next time I see that boss, why I'm gonna, and you have the whole conversation in your mind. You get there, you're like, you don't even have the conversation.
But these are habits, and like it says in that piece today by Kempis, an old habit is hard to break, and no one is willing to be led farther than he can see. And right now there is a lot of blindness.
Mm-hmm. And here's something that'll make you happier. If you don't compare yourself to others, it'll go a long way. What are some of the stories that we should be looking for at spiritdaily.com, Michael H. Brown?
Well, we'll be having more stories on prophecy. We'll be having more stories on. We have a lot right now on the church crisis, and it is a crisis. There's no denying that. And we'll also be having a story on how to discern various alleged mystical events, and what we usually do, just across a gamut of area from what's going on in the culture and politics, society, and so forth, to the deep spiritual realm. So, we've been in an intense time of the year, of the season, and buckle your seatbelts.
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that. We're getting ready for the Nativity Fast in the Orthodox Church as we prepare for the incarnation of Christ. We fast for Great Lent. We fast, there's Apostles' Fast, and then there's the Dormition. You fast before the Dormition of Mary, the Mother of God, the Theotokos. So we do a lot of fasting when we think about it. We try anyway. I judging by, I hate to judge, but by judging by some people, I'm just wondering about how much they actually do fast. But that's a different story. And I noticed that when we do fast and we go through those periods where we're anticipating the nativity of Christ, the resurrection, that's when the temptations and things really hit the hardest. Usually when you're in the middle of fasting and praying. We don't know why that is, but it seems to be usually the case.
That's a devil.
Yeah. So because he doesn't want you to fast or pray, wants to throw you off.
And Zach, if I can interject here, the Virgin Mary at Medjugorje said something amazingly powerful about fasting. She said that with prayer and fasting, this is a direct quote, you can stop wars and even suspend the laws of nature, unquote. And you think about that and you say, wow. And I fast 2 days a week. I hope I can continue it. I've been doing it for decades. And I find if I don't fast, I can't stand it. I can't stand the feeling. And my eyesight gets all fogged up. There is a clarity that comes with fasting, and there is a spiritual development that comes with it, and you can set aside anger and all these counterproductive, blinding emotions and kind of see over the top.
Yeah, you don't have to go to hot yoga and wear yoga pants to do this. You can wear your jeans and a regular T-shirt, participate.
Yeah, you can lose a lot of weight by fasting.
Yes, you can, and let me just give a little guidance to all of that. I would suggest finding a spiritual father or a spiritual advisor. I have a spiritual father. And we discuss these various things because for some people, because of the medications they're on, they can't go on a complete fast. So you alter your diet. You can always abstain from things. It's more important to guard what comes out of your mouth than what you put into your mouth. And that's scripturally sound. Even Jesus talks about that. So in relation to fasting, take it slow. Don't just start right. All right, tomorrow I'm not going to eat a darn thing. Well, you can have maybe just, especially if you're, let's say you work you're in building, you're a steel guy, whatever they call steel worker. You need the protein. If you don't eat the protein, you might kill somebody on the work site. So make sure that you have enough substance to do your job throughout the day. To make sure you have the energy. Now, here's what you can cut out. So you'll have a nice protein for breakfast, maybe a couple of eggs. You can avoid the bread. And then for lunch, maybe a yogurt or just a, piece of fish or something like that. Have a salad. And then for dinner, just have another very small meal. Eat some soup. Give up the snacking in between and the late night stuff, and I think you're good to go. Drink more water. Actually, everything I'm telling you is the perfect way to lose weight. And at the same time, it's a modified fast. And then you can work on that with your spiritual father.
Yeah, I would work on that and develop more.
Right. And on top of that, develop a prayer rule where you said that if you don't fast, you get all foggy and you get a little disrupted in your sensibilities, so to speak. If I don't do my prayers for the day, I do what's called the hours. In the Catholic Church, they have the office. That is really for priests and religious, but the laity can do that as well. It requires some dedication, but start small. Start with your morning prayers, an afternoon prayer, an evening prayer. Your morning prayer can be a simple thank you, God, for this day, and our Father. If you want to say Hail Mary and a Glory Be, then that's a good way to start. Then, make sure that you remind yourself you have God in your life throughout the day. You could say the Jesus prayer. This is what we do in the Orthodox Church. It's good for anybody. Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You could say that over and over again, and what it does, it puts you right in front of Christ.
Yeah, and I recommend, too, that developing to the point where you can not only say the rosary, but say all 15 decades, because it's extremely powerful and it's extremely necessary in our time.
Yep, you're right about that. So the point being is something you build yourself up to, but start small. Find a spiritual advisor. Go to confession on a regular basis.
Yes.
That's very good. You'll save yourself the copay of $35 to $55. Because I'm a priest, I go once a week, but sometimes once every other week. But usually, I go to confession for on a weekly basis for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I always want to make sure that I'm in a state of grace. Number two, I have to hear a lot of confessions, so I say I wouldn't say I do penance for people, but I pray for them when I hear these confessions. And number three, I have to give last rites on a regular basis. So it's just for me what I practice. But, everybody's got to develop their own thing. So this is where you get a regular confessor, someone that you go to on a regular basis. And I'll tell you what happens with that. If there's a bad habit that you're trying to break and you go to the same confessor over and over again, and you're going to keep confessing the same sin over and over again, eventually you're going to go, you know what? I just don't want to have to confess this again, and it'll break you up. It's how it works. Sometimes, and confession is the place where it's time to be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed not only about your sexual sins, but you should also be embarrassed about when you mistreat others. That should be just as embarrassing as that.
And your thoughts towards others.
Right, and your thoughts towards others.
That's
so,
right.
Just go into confession on a regular basis and pray. And once again, we'll say this in regard to fasting, prayer, confession. Start small and work from there. Don't forget, you can find the latest trends and what's going on in all the news at spiritdaily.com. For Michael H. Brown, I'm Zach Martin. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back same Zach time, same Zach channel next week.